Hola, ¿qué tal amigos? Buenos días, buenas tardes y buenas noches. No importa la hora que sea, siempre es un gran momento para aprender español con Profesor Pablo. Today's lesson is haber, H-A-B-E-R. We know there are two main usages of the verb haber. One is with a past participle, the verb number two, the habido form. For example, it has rained, ha llovido. In that case, haber is the auxiliary verb meaning to have, like have studied, have eaten, etc. But today, we're taking a look at haber plus noun. And to translate it to English, it means there plus the verb to be, like there is, there are, there will be, there was, there were, etc. I in the present tense has two meanings, either there is or there are. Okay? Hay una fiesta de cumpleaños mañana para mamá. There's a birthday party for mom tomorrow. Hay muchos regalos escondidos. There are many gifts hidden away. Hubo and había. This is where the difficulty comes in, right? It's the old imperfect versus preterite. We use preterite for a completed past action, something that is over and done, and we use imperfect for an incomplete past action. When you refer to the action, it's still ongoing and happening when you refer to it. It's not over, it's not done, it's not completed. And we understand the words in English, but to incorporate them into Spanish and understand the concept, it just takes some time, it takes practice, and takes a lot of examples. So let's take a look here with hubo. Let's say you want to say, last week there was a party at my house. La semana pasada hubo una fiesta. You're in today, looking backwards towards last week and just making a statement, there was a party. If you want to say there was an explosion at the factory yesterday, that would be hubo. Hubo una explosión en la fábrica ayer. If you want to say like there was a party in the downtown area last month. El mes pasado hubo una gran fiesta, a big party, una gran fiesta en el centro de la ciudad. There was a wedding at the church last Sunday. El domingo pasado hubo una boda en la iglesia. Remember the letter H, no matter where you see it at the beginning of a word or in the middle of a word, it is always silent, no exception to that. Hubo is for something that you're looking back towards the past and you're just making a statement that there was something, right? Like there was a drought that lasted for 2 years. Hubo una sequía que duró por 2 años. It's over, it's done, you're referring to it in a completed state. Now, haber means there was or there were, the same as hubo. However, we use it for an incomplete past action. Now, I know that's not really clear with a lot of you. Well, look at this. If you're talking about something in the past that was still ongoing and happening when you're referring to it, you're kind of reliving it, right? And the action isn't completed. For example, like, let's look here, fiesta. If you want to say there was a party yesterday, ayer hubo una fiesta. If you want to say, when I drove by the house, there was a party ongoing. Cuando yo pasé por la casa en mi carro, había una fiesta. There was a party. That would be había. Let's take a look at accidente. You want to say there was an accident yesterday at the corner. Ayer en la esquina hubo un accidente. If you want to say when I was driving by, there was an accident, meaning like it was like the paramedics were there, people were standing around trying to help and watch, etc. Había un accidente enfrente de la tienda cuando yo pasé por allí en mi carro. Okay, it was ongoing. You also could come over here and say, había habido un accidente enfrente de la tienda. Let's take a look at problemas. If you want to say there are a lot of problems, hay muchos problemas, right? If you want to say there were a lot of problems last year with that car, el año pasado hubo muchos problemas con el carro. You're standing in today and you're talking about the past. There were many problems last year. El año pasado hubo muchos problemas. But if you want to say, yesterday when I was at work, there were a lot of problems with the machine. Ayer cuando estaba en el trabajo, había muchos problemas. We say había because we're referring to the existence of the problems still while you were at work. As you walked by where the problem was, let's say it was a copy machine, había problemas con la copiadora, ¿verdad? Había problemas. You walked in the morning, problems, afternoon, problems, and you're reliving it. A lot of this has to do with your perspective, your mental perspective. Ayer hubo problemas en el trabajo con la copiadora. Now you're in the present, looking back to the past, hubo problemas. But if you jump back into the past and relive the day and say, ay, 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 teníamos problemas con la copiadora, había problemas con la copiadora, it's imperfect because you're talking about the action in an incomplete form while it was still ongoing in the past. Let's take a look at boda. There was a wedding at the church yesterday. Ayer hubo una boda en la iglesia. When I was walking down the sidewalk, there was a wedding ongoing in the church. Cuando yo estaba caminando por la banqueta, por la acera, había una boda en la iglesia. Hubo una boda means there was a wedding, it's over, it's done. Había una boda means there was a wedding, it was going on, it was still happening. Let's take a look at carrera. All the streets were closed. Todas las calles estaban cerradas, like when I was driving home. Todas las calles estaban cerradas. ¿Por qué? Why? Porque había una carrera de carros de carrera de Indianapolis. Había una carrera, there was a car race. And the idea of ongoing is not said, but it's understood. Había una carrera. La calle estaba cerrada porque había una carrera. The road was closed because there was a race going on. Let's take a look at explosion. There was an explosion last week. La semana pasada, en la playa, hubo una explosión. You're in today, you're looking back at yesterday or last week, into the past. You're separating yourself. But as soon as you jump into the past and relive the day, then you're going to go with imperfect. And we're not going to go with había una explosión. We're going to take había here with the past participle. There had been, like you drove by and it was just all blown up, right? You would say, había habido una explosión. There had been an explosion. Había habido una explosión. There was a lot of trash in the street when you went by, right? Había mucha basura. You're describing. It was already there before you got there. It was there when you went through it, and it was there after you left the area. Había mucha basura. We want to go with imperfect, okay? And you could say like, ¿por qué había mucha basura? Because there had been a race the day before. Porque había habido. There had been. Había habido. There had been. Había habido una carrera el día anterior. Let's go with temblor. There was an earthquake this morning. Esta mañana hubo un temblor. Hubo un temblor. If I want to say the people were scared, las personas tenían miedo because there had been an earthquake. Porque había habido un temblor. Let's take a look here at desfile. That's a parade. There was a parade last Saturday. El sábado pasado, hubo un desfile. Same thing. The road was closed because there was a parade ongoing. El desfile, o sea, la calle estaba cerrada porque había un desfile en la calle principal en el centro de la ciudad. The road was closed because there was a parade on the main street in the downtown area. Let's go with tormenta. The plane could not land because there was a storm. El avión no pudo, preterite, aterrizar, that's a fact, it's over, porque había una tormenta, because there was a storm. The storm didn't happen at the instant they couldn't land. They flew in, they were flying towards the airport, and the storm was still ongoing in the past, right? So they couldn't land, porque había una tormenta. But if you want to say there was a storm last week, hubo. It's done, you're in the present, looking backwards to the past. Hubo una tormenta la semana pasada. But if you're saying the plane, el avión no pudo aterrizar, and you're jumping into the past, because at that moment in the past, había una tormenta. There was a storm. There was a robbery at the bank. Hubo un robo en el banco. You drive by the next day, wow, there were a lot of police in front of the bank because there had been a robbery. Well, you're going to say, when you drove by, they were there before you got there. They were there after you left there. So the idea of them being there wasn't completed yet. It's not a completed past action. So you're not going to say hubo. Había mucha policía enfrente del banco because there had been a robbery. Porque había habido un robo. You know, if there were a star performer for our lesson today, it is this. Había habido. They don't teach that in Spanish books, in Spanish classes. Habido, había habido. There have been or there has been. There had been. Había habido. The people were scared because there had been a robbery. Tenían miedo porque había habido un robo. There had been. That's a big star for today. Let's go with tráfico. I got home late. That's what I did. Llegué tarde. It's over. I did arrive home. It's over. Because there was a lot of traffic. Well, when I was driving, there was a lot of traffic, right? I'm referring to driving home, and there was a lot of traffic. Again, the traffic just didn't instantly appear and disappear. The instant I passed through the way home, it was already there. It was there when I passed through, and it was still there when I left. So you'd say, llegué tarde porque había mucho tráfico. There was a lot of traffic. Había mucho tráfico. To describe a situation in the past as it was ongoing, not over, incomplete, you're going to go with the imperfect, regardless of the verb. For example, I had a headache. Tenía un dolor de cabeza. I had a headache. They are ongoing, like when you saw me. Cuando tú me viste, cuando hablamos, when we talked, tenía un dolor de cabeza. That's imperfect because I'm not referring to, when you saw me that instant, the totality of me having a headache, it wasn't done. It wasn't completed. I had a headache before you saw me, when you saw me, and after you saw me. That's why we use the imperfect, to describe an ongoing, incomplete, still happening action in the past. Personas, there were a lot of people at the party. If you're referring to like when you were there, imagining yourself, you're walking around, you're at the party, you're describing everything that was going on at the party. There were a lot of people. Había muchas personas. It was dark, estaba oscuro, there were no lights turned on, no había ninguna luz encendida. Había, imperfect. You're going to use imperfect to describe an ongoing, past, incomplete action. Imperfect. And siempre, right down here. Siempre, in the past, you're going to take imperfect. There were always problems. Siempre había problemas. There were always a lot of people at the game. Siempre había muchas personas en el partido. Repeated past action, imperfect. We always would talk when we would get together. Siempre hablábamos mucho cuando nos juntábamos. We would always talk a lot when we would get together. Okay? So there you go. Hubo versus había. Our special star today is había habido. There had been. There had been. Again, they were afraid because there had been a robbery. Tenían miedo, imperfect, porque había habido un robo. When you say they were afraid, you're referring to whoever they are at that given moment, like when you drove by and you saw them, or during the time of the robbery. Tenían miedo porque había habido un robo. And again, sometimes you could say hubo, and for the same thing you could say había. It just depends in your mind if you're separating yourself, staying in the present and completing it in the past, or if you're jumping into the past and reliving it. If you're reliving it, you're going to go with había. If you're separating yourself, like there was an explosion, hubo una explosión. There were problems at the store yesterday. Ayer hubo problemas en la tienda. But if you're referring in your mind like, and the idea is that you're talking about when you were at work, then you would say había problemas en la tienda, like there were ongoing problems in the store that had to be dealt with. So we're going to practice hubo and había more with more examples, but please, your homework would be to listen and read and hear and watch TV, and every time you hear hubo and había, think about it for a second and absorb how it's being used and in the context it's being used. It can be a little bit slippery, hubo and había. Again, some person may say hubo and the other person might say había. It depends on what you're thinking up here. If you're separating yourself and looking at it as a completed past action, you're going to go with hubo. But if you throw yourself in your mind and you're kind of reliving it and telling the story from that perspective, it's going to be había. Okay? If you want to go and say what there was or what there were as you were, I went to the beach. Ayer fui a la playa. There were a lot of people. Había muchas personas. There were a lot of seashells along the coast. Había muchas conchas a lo largo de la costa. There were big waves. Había olas grandes. There were sharks. Había tiburones. A lot of ways to use había and a lot of ways to use hubo. Hubo versus había. I know we need to go over this again, and we'll come up with more examples, and we'll hit it again and again and again, and we'll knock it into submission. We'll get it. Okay? Gracias, amigos. Es todo por ahora. Tengan ustedes un super gran día. Nos vemos pronto. Bye bye.